just a little update on air conditioning. So I got my new current probe, and on high right now it's taking 21, it's 10 millivolts per amp, so it's 21 amps to operate on high. And if I turn it down, it's taking just under 15 amps. And I'm getting my normal performance out of it. It's 24 degrees in and 16 degrees out. The fan's on high, and so I still have to do some insulating, around these, like this thermal expansion valve here. You see the whole thing's all frosted up. Wrapped it up in insulating tape when it's installed in the car, so I'm not throwing that energy away. And yeah, so it's slowly, as it's getting colder, the current's going up, so it's 22 and quarter amps, 22 and a half amps, so it's slowly creeping up towards that 25 number on high. So makes sense from a thermal efficiency perspective that it should be up around there, because it has to produce about 300 some odd watts of energy to produce the 800 plus watts of cooling. So there we go. Just one further note. So on low, it's taking about 18 amps, and I'm getting 24 degrees in and 17 out. So I'm losing a couple degrees of cooling. So it goes from 8.5 degrees of differential cooling at the high fan speed down to 6. And so that works out to the same relative efficiency numbers. So we're good. I'd kind of like it to reduce the current even further than 18 amps, but it is what it is, and it's usable. So I can see having the thing on high, and then cranking it down to save some of the current if the alternator is having trouble keeping up, say at idle or something. Maybe have the computer sense the idle speed and drop the current and keep, or if we start going negative on the battery draw, then have it adjust the compressor speed down, that kind of thing. That's what happens in my Prius. When you go on to electric and you slow down, the compressor slows down too, to save juice. Okay, well that's it on this. Check something with my voltmeter. So even though the charger is telling me it's 12.5 volts at the battery terminals, which it is, I've got these very long leads with high gauge wire. I'd parallel them up, but it's not enough. I'm getting a 1 volt drop across those alligator clips to the heavier gauge wire running into the controller. So that 1 volt drop means that I'll end up with about 22 amps on high and 16 amps on low, rather than 25 and 18. So because these things, they take more current into the controller. It's called a DC-DC power supply, so it'll just pull more current as the battery voltage drops to maintain equivalent power into the compressor. So that's what the numbers are. So it's looking really good, actually. Okay. Well, so I got the kicker working, and I'm streaming from Spotify. Let me turn the volume down here. So basically, it comes with its own, the amp comes with an application that you can go and set all your levels for your different frequencies for your equalizers for each of your speakers, and master levels, and then there's a front control that adjusts basically the volume and the bass boost from the front of the car, and then what's called a software mixer. So it works well, and I have no complaints. So I'm going to take my vintage Concord, which has actually been completely restored internally. So the tape mechanism's got new pulleys and all kinds of good stuff, and it's got the DBX noise reduction as the additional module. I'm going to wire that in now, because I should be able to do both what I'm doing here, which is streaming Bluetooth to the to that module over there. So I'm doing two things at once. I've got the control software going over Bluetooth to talk to the amp and adjust it, and then I've got the Spotify streaming going to it at exactly the same time, which is, I wasn't sure you could do that, but yeah, you can, and it makes sense that you can do that. Basically, it's taking about 3 amps on standby when the amp's turned on, which isn't great, but I'll have it set up so that the only time the amp is on is when the Concord is on, so I'll be able to just sort of turn the power button of the Concord on, and then I'll be able to then do all my streaming and stuff. So still haven't tried phone calls and all that kind of stuff, mainly because I don't have the mic plugged in, but I might wait until that's installed in the car, and then I'll, because I've already got the mic cable routing through the chassis. So anyway, I'll hook up the Concord and I'll show you what that's like next. I thought I'd show you some wiring principles. So it doesn't matter what type of crimp connector, like these are Molex connectors. These are things you can get at any sort of hobby store or on Amazon, and they've got 2 sets of crimps. Like one is the back is for the insulation, and the forward one is for the wire. So I cut off all the grunge, like all the shit that you know, from years of people. This is a used unit, obviously it's over 30 something years old, so I've cut them off, you know, because guess what, in the manual they originally had Molex type connectors. So and then I'll have 2 4-pin connectors plus the other ones that are intact, the original. This is for the DBX noise reduction, and Dolby C was available as well. I should look for that and see if I can find it online, see if someone would sell one to me. Anyway, you use a proper crimp tool, and these have got like a heart-shaped, so the ends, as you can see, they fold down and pinch onto the wire. And sometimes, depending on the type of connector, like this Molex connector, this particular size works. Other sizes don't. The end pieces that grab the insulation can be too long to do this, so you can either use a pair of cutters and just snip off the ends of the tin, make them shorter. In this case, they're the right length. And then both sets have this nice, sorry, out of focus here, this nice sort of double fold that pinches both down onto the insulation and onto the actual copper. And then you just push them into the connector when they're done. I'll show you that in a sec. So, you know, this is speakers, which I won't be using, but I'll terminate them anyway. And this is power and remote control and battery backup for the old, you know, preset to memory. So now, you know, they're easy to terminate too in the car with another harness. Just snap it in and out quickly. So it's awesome. Yeah, so it works fine. I'm going in when I basically turn the when I turn this on and off. This now turns on and off with the remote sense. And if I go out of go back into Spotify or just stream anything, I guess, what it does is it overrides the analog input with digital streaming input. So you're listening to music and you want to play something off of your phone or whatever, then as soon as I hit play here, it and there are different volume settings, right? So you control the volume through your phone or your tablet or whatever, and then if I stop this, it pauses for a sec, and then the radio will kick back in after 5 seconds or something. So it's working, and I can confidently install this. And it takes, you know, whether or not there's any music up to quite reasonable listening levels, it only takes about 3 amps, 3.5 amps. So whether you're putting music through it or not, 3.5 amps is what it's taking when it's on. So obviously keep that in mind when I'm trying to run air conditioning and everything else at the same time with a racing alternator that's been with underdrive pulleys to, you know, allow the engine to rev to 9,000 without blowing up the alternator. So I'm getting ready to put the dash in, and I need to make a support. So my Concord HPL 130 deck, my vintage deck, is rough positioned in, and what I have to do is build a metal bracket to support it. So basically I'm going to have it mounted so that there's a plate that runs out, and it'll be riveted in the sides here, so there'll be little wings that come up, come to the back, down, catch the mounting screw, and then grab the hole here that's used to mount the plenum for the windscreen. So the idea is it's going to be held securely. This is actually quite heavy, and then the idea is I can just sort of slide this thing in, and it'll be supported nicely. And then right underneath it, I've got you've got the heater controls, and then I have a plenum that runs out here for the air conditioning vents that connects into the slot there. So it's going to be kind of tight because I've got a wiring harness that runs across here from the computer, so it's going to be a bit tricky. And then I gotta put the digital dash in, and I've made this whole thing by modifying the original, and you should be able to bolt it all in and get some spacers in there and get it absolutely form-fitting perfect. So that's what I'm working on right now. So I got this bracket made. There's a tab that runs down to this bolt here, and then it's going to be riveted in now that it's in exactly the right position for my supporting my Concord. And then yeah, I'll shoot a bit more video now. So there it is, right set up. So it got a nice solid surface and a bolt hole at the back, and then it's riveted on the sides. And my Bosch right angle drill barely fit in the opening, so I was lucky I was able to get the rivet in there nicely. And anyway, I'm going to mount the radio in there and just do a test fit. But look, well, with that plenum installed, it's going to be tough to get that bolt on the back, but I'll be able to manage it. So no, it's good. That bracket in the back, it's tight fit, but it works, so that's now properly supported. The only thing I don't love, and it is what it is the original template that the Concord has kind of goes square out to the edge, while the GTI dash kind of rounds off. But anyway, I can always trim, but I don't really want to, the bezel, so that it doesn't hide the little red stripe at the corner here. I'm also going to take the heat gun, and you know, 35 years, it's got a little bit of a sag where the bolts were holding this dash faceplate in. I'm just going to gently heat it and see if I can square it off and bend it straight again, so it's just a little bit cleaner looking, a little nicer looking. But no, this is going to be good. I'm getting pretty excited about getting this dash in. So here's the bracket, and the magnets I don't have yet, but they're small magnets, and you can see there's a little metal bracket here, and it touches the front of this bracket here. It's been riveted in, and then it goes and touches, or will touch, the magnet on the back of it. So in the back you can see the bracket that's been made. So it'll go click onto the magnet in the front, and then click, and to hold it in place so it won't pop back out. So, and then that'll all be hidden by the panel. Just a point, sometimes these tabs break off, and I just made one out of aluminum here to replace the one that was dead, so it's all good. So I've been working away as a metal worker here, making brackets. So this strange contraption holds the air conditioning compressor. I'll show you where that goes in a sec. Actually, I can show you now. There's a happy little place right above the end of the transmission here. So this tucks down right in there. And some 3M adhesive on the top plate and then a bolt on the bottom, and that should be really secure. So I'll mount that compressor in a sec, show you how that goes. And then this piece here, another tough one to manufacture, but it basically converts the old fuse box mounting location into a nice big flat panel surface. So it goes in there and it mounts against the lower and upper bolt holes, and then the air conditioning controller mounts onto there. So the air conditioning controller ultimately sits underneath the dash right there. So that's the deal. And everything's a fucking mess in here, but I'm on the final countdown. As you can see, I'm just getting, that's all basically installed now, and with the clear cover goes on top of it. Just pulling a few final wires here and there, and then the back will be completely done. So there's the bracket. See where it sits in the engine bay, and then the compressor. I won't set it in there too far because it's not really bolted in, but basically the compressor, I'll zoom back out. The compressor sits like that, and then the fittings run behind it. So there we go. That's how it works. So I ended up putting two number 6 Allen head bolts over there on the top side. I was thinking of just using 3M adhesive, but this thing is, 11 or 12 pounds. And I'm going to mount the filter dryer to the side of it, so it's going to be even heavier. And I thought, why mess around? So I drilled and tapped, and so now it's pretty solid. I probably could have made it out of heavier gauge metal, but I think this is more than adequate. I've got it gusted, triangulated underneath, so it's pretty good. And those fittings on the top clear the roof by, or the hood by a good 2.5 inches. So it's going to be fine. I think that makes me happy. Well, as I said before, I'm putting a little Lexan shroud around it, and then with a fan that monitors the temperature. The computer will monitor the temperature of the compressor, and because there's going to be a cold air box on this side, it'll pull cold air and blow it across the compressor and keep it cool so the engine doesn't overheat it. It'll probably survive without too much stress, but it's good to keep it as cool as possible. So that's the idea. Filter dryer. So the discharge goes to the condenser under the car with number 6 line, comes back into the back of the filter dryer, and then another number 6 line 180 looping around over top of it, going from there to the evaporator. From the evaporator it comes back with the number 8, and of course it goes through the thermal expansion valve when it hits the evaporator. So that's the circuit. And then there's a little protective cocoon that I'll build so I can blow some cold air across that, and the air will flow out the top and the bottom. As long as there's a positive pressure from one side, it'll keep the hot air from the engine away from it, and that should be good. And I've got thermocouples or thermistors monitoring 6 different temperatures throughout the car. So input and output of the condenser and the evaporator, that's 4. The compressor itself is 5. the interior cabin temperature, sorry, that's 6, and then the amplifier and battery area of the car at the back, and the wheel well, that's got another temperature sensor, and the fans will speed up and slow down to keep the temperature where it needs to be. So the fans in all locations, the condenser fans under the car are computer controlled speed wise, this one is, and the one in the trunk is as well. So just taking advantage of the power of the ECU to drive all that stuff, and because they're low current, I can go direct out of the ECU because it's less than like a half an amp to drive a typical fan, and each current lead is capable of 2 amps out of the ECU with no relay, so you can use direct connections to all the fans, nice and simple. So here's the air conditioning controller, and I've got the factory in China to make me another one because I'm thinking of standardizing this and productizing it maybe. So it has a faster turn-on characteristics, so I can cycle the compressor, a couple times a minute, on and off, to reduce the load on the battery if I don't need the cooling capacity, rather than running it and having the evaporator freeze up. So yeah, so that gives me a chance to sort of vary the duty cycle down to 0 basically, rather than having it sort of full or half, or I think it's more like 60% and 100%. So anyway, this one will come out, and the other one will go in when it arrives. But that's the way it mounts now, with the new bracket in there, and then we're good. Yeah, so this is the oil cooler I'm using as a condenser, and I got it set it up with some spacers there, and I'm going to be mounting it in a sec under the car. So it's all set to go with those fans, which, as I said, are under computer control to turn on and off and speed up and slow down and stuff. So a little weather pack connector on them. So anyway, off we go. I'm going to put it in now. So there it is under the car, and I'll have to fiddle with it a little bit, but it hangs down a little bit below the I guess the lowest point otherwise might be the exhaust header, and it's actually not quite as low as the exhaust header. You can't quite see maybe from this angle here. If I back up a bit, it's yeah, so we're above the exhaust header, but the header's further forward. So the question is, going over a speed bump or anything, I'm not sure. I have a 3/4 inch gap between this and the frame, and I think it's gonna be fine. It's a good position. And on the front, I haven't run the lines yet, but the lines from the front, sorry, this is kind of over bright. The lines from the front are going to have to loop up into the engine bay area. One of the lines I can fit through the rubber grommet here, but I won't have room for the second one, so it'll have to go outside of that. There goes my light. Outside of the maybe either in here or on the other side here. Have to figure that out. So anyway, it's a good position, I think, for this hidden under the car like that. One last thing, I will build a little shield that'll just a little aluminum shield that'll come down and just protect with some of that thermal insulation. You can see up here. I'll put a little bracket that extends down just so the heat from the exhaust doesn't radiate onto that and fight me. I'm trying to cool the air conditioning system, cool it down. Oh, and these fans are waterproof in case anybody thinks they're going to get damaged under the car. They're designed to be submerged in water of all things, so hopefully they'll survive.